It's 1902. A Danish farmer is plowing a peat bog in northwestern New Zealand. Routine work, nothing out of the ordinary. When his plow catches on something, he pulls it free and finds a tangle of corroded bronze, a horse, a wagon, a disc. He figures it's scrap and takes it home. What he'd actually pulled out of the ground was a 3,400-year-old religious object, a bronze horse pulling a golden disc on a six-wheeled wagon. One side of the disc coated in gold, the other plain bronze. Day and night, the sun's journey, encoded in metal and buried in a bog for 34 centuries until a farmer with a plow accidentally dug up somebody's god. That object is called the Trundholm Sun Chariot, and it's the beginning of a story that ends with your Christmas tree. I'm Alex Arnold, and this is Arnie's Brain Train. Really quickly, the images in this video are AI generated. I use Ideogram, it's great for low budget, and there's no copyright headaches, and it occasionally gives me something so intentionally unhinged that I can't bring myself to cut it out. This, for example, is supposed to be a Bronze Age Scandinavian priest performing a solar ritual, but Ideogram gave him the energy of a guy who just got really into CrossFit, and now he won't stop talking about it. So it stays. They all stay. If something I say today makes you want to argue, good. All of the sources are pinned in the comments and in the description. Go check them. And just remember, I didn't write the academic papers, Fleming called it. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the religion that you've been practicing your whole life without even knowing it. We already met the Trundholm Sun Chariot, but here's the thing. It's just one object. One farmer, one bog, one lucky day. Before we get into what this religion looked like and where it came from, I want to put the actual scale of the evidence in front of you, because this is not a one artifact argument. Across Sweden and Norway, especially concentrated in the Bohuslän region of western Sweden, there are rock carvings, petroglyphs, that number in the tens of thousands. Tens of thousands. They're not just scattered marks. These are coherent images repeated consistently across a vast geographic area over roughly 1,000 years. Circles with spokes, discs mounted on ships, figures with raised arms, footprints oriented toward the sunrise, axes that archaeologists now believe carried strong solar symbolic associations. And many of these carving sites are deliberately oriented so the images catch the light of the sunrise or the sunset on the summer and winter solstice. You don't accidentally carve tens of thousands of solar symbols and then accidentally position them to align with the solstices. Then there's the Nebra sky disk, found in Germany in 1999, technically outside Scandinavia, but firmly within the same Bronze Age cultural network, dated to around 1600 BC. Bronze about 12 inches across, inlaid with gold. It shows the sun, the moon, and what are almost certainly the Pleiades star cluster. And on one edge, there's a gold arc. That arc corresponds precisely to the angle between the summer solstice sunrise and the winter solstice sunrise at the latitude where it was found. Somebody measured that. Somebody did the astronomical observation, worked out the geometry, and then encoded it permanently in bronze. That is functional astronomical knowledge preserved in a ritual object. And the burial deposits. Solar disk symbols, miniature axes, grave goods oriented east-west towards the sunrise, and the picture is consistent across artifact types, across countries, and across centuries. So, what you're looking at is a culture that tracks celestial mechanics precisely enough to encode solstice angles in metal, maintained a consistent religious visual vocabulary across a huge geographic region for over 1,000 years, and had the organizational capacity to pull all of that off. The chariot is the famous piece. The tens of thousands of petroglyphs are the proof that it wasn't an anomaly. Now here's the challenge with Bronze Age religion. They didn't leave us a scripture. No Bible, no Vedas, no Eddas. Those all come later. What they left are objects, carvings, graves, and architecture. So everything we know about what these people actually believed has had to be reconstructed from physical evidence. And when you do that reconstruction seriously, it paints a detailed picture. The central concept running through all of it is a solar cycle cosmology, a belief system built around the sun's journey, both daily and annual, understood as having a visible phase and a hidden phase. The sun rises, crosses the sky, and sets. But in this theology, it doesn't simply disappear at night. It enters another realm, makes an unseen journey, and rises again. The whole cycle, life, death, renewal, is encoded in the movement of the sun. The ship imagery is where this gets concrete. Ships are everywhere in Nordic Bronze Age art, on bronze razors, rock carvings, axe handles, and burial goods. And here's the detail that matters. Many of these ships are empty. No crew, no cargo. Or they carry a single solar disk. Fleming calls interpretation, now the dominant scholarly position, is that these ships represent the sun's transportation. The sun travels by ship, by day across the visible sky, by night through the underworld. The solar bark. Rituals were performed to keep it moving. Objects were deposited, and the community had obligations to the cosmic cycle, and somebody was responsible for maintaining those obligations. If you watched my episode that I did on Hor-Aha and what made that pharaoh a god, this is going to sound very familiar, because this is almost exactly the same Egyptian concept of Ra and the solar bark. Ra travels by day in the Manjet boat. At night, he boards the Mesektet boat, travels through the Duat, the underworld, faces whatever's down there, defeats it, and then emerges reborn at sunrise. The daytime ship and the nighttime ship, the visible journey and the hidden one. We'll come back to what that overlap actually means. Burial practices carry the same theology as well. Bronze Age Scandinavian burial mounds consistently show bodies oriented on an east-west axis, which isn't a coincidence of geography. It's a deliberate statement about the direction of the journey after death. Grave goods included solar symbols, miniature axes, and, in some elite burials, objects with parallels across Bronze Age cultures from Britain to the Black Sea. The dead were being sent somewhere, and both the direction and the provisions mattered. And there's clear evidence of a specialized ritual class, people whose job was maintaining the rites, not farming or fighting. Their graves are different not in wealth, but in kind, with folding stools, which appear in religious art as ceremonial seats of authority, horned helmets, and bronze lures, covered wind instruments found almost exclusively in ritual deposits. These people had a specific function, and their communities knew it. The whole system had a calendar. The alignment of carving sites and burial mounds to solstice sunrises is too consistent, across too wide of a geographic area, to be coincidental. These communities were gathering at specific places at specific times of year to mark the sun's turning points. That's a liturgical calendar. That requires coordination, shared understanding, and enough institutional continuity to sustain it across generations. So where did all this come from? And this is the question that I want to answer before we talk about the outside connections. Because if you don't understand the foundation, the parallels with Egypt and India and Greece just sound like speculation. Once you see the foundation, they start to look like something else. So the first thing to establish is the sun veneration in Northern Europe is older than the Bronze Age by thousands of years. The megalithic tradition, the people who built Stonehenge, the passage tombs of Ireland and Scandinavia, and the stone circles across Atlantic Europe, these are Neolithic farmers, predating the Indo-European migrations entirely, and they were already orienting their most important monuments to the sun. Take Newgrange in Ireland, built around 3200 BC, older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's engineered so that on the winter solstice sunrise, a shaft of light travels the full length of the passage and illuminates the inner chamber for exactly 17 minutes. That required years of sustained astronomical observation, precise structural engineering, and a community that considered the solar turning point worth that level of investment. And comparable passage tombs with solar alignments still exist throughout Scandinavia. So the baseline is already there. Long before the Bronze Age begins, what happens around 1800 BC is not an invention, it's an amplification. Three things converge to produce the Bronze Age solar religion that we see in the artifacts. The first is that Neolithic substrate, agricultural communities who had already been organizing their sacred architecture and their year around the sun for millennia before the Bronze Age began. The second is the Indo-European migration, starting several centuries before 1800 BC, waves of steppe pastoralists from the Pontic-Caspian region spread west into Europe and east toward South Asia, bringing with them the Proto-Indo-European religious tradition with solar theology at its core. The horse-drawn sun, the sky father, the solar twins, a formalized cosmological vocabulary that overlaid and partially merged with what was already there. The third is the Bronze Age trade network itself. Scandinavian amber shows up in Mycenaean Greek tombs. The tin and copper in Scandinavian bronze objects couldn't have come from local sources. They were imported from the British Isles, Central Europe, and the Aegean. And the people moving the metal were also moving ideas. Craft techniques, religious concepts, all traveled the same routes as commodities. The Trundholm sun chariot is what you get when those three layers interact. The chariot concept, the horse pulling the sun, is Indo-European. The golden disc draws on broader Bronze Age solar iconographic vocabulary circulating through the trade networks. The execution, the specific form, is all Scandinavian, local and internationally connected at the same time. One more piece of evidence for how connected this network was. The Egtved girl, found in a burial mound in Denmark dated to around 1370 BC. Between 16 and 18 years old, she was buried in a hollow oak coffin with a belt bearing a large solar disk and a bucket of fermented ritual drink: wheat, honey, cranberries, bog myrtle, and sweet gale. Isotopic analysis of her teeth shows that she was not Danish. She had traveled hundreds of miles, probably from southwestern Germany, to be buried where she was. Someone in this religious network was moving people across long distances, not just metal. Now that the foundation is in place, the outside connections are a different kind of conversation. Not, did these people copy each other? It's, how deep does the shared inheritance actually go? Let's start with linguistics, because it's the cleanest evidence. The comparative study of Indo-European languages reveals a shared religious vocabulary going all the way back to the original proto-language. In Sanskrit, the sun is Surya. In Latin, Sol. In Old Norse, Sol. In Greek, Helios. In Old Irish, Suil. These are cognates inherited from the same ancestral word rather than borrowed from one another. The Skyfather deity follows exactly the same pattern. Dies Pater in reconstructed Proto-Indo-European becomes Zeus Pater in Greek, Jupiter in Latin, and Tyr in Norse. The vocabulary was shared because the theology was shared, and it traveled with the migration. The chariot image goes even deeper. In the Rig Veda, compiled around 1500 to 1200 BC, the sun god Surya rides a chariot drawn by 7 horses across the sky. In Greek mythology, Helios drives his chariot from east to west each day. In Norse mythology, the sun goddess Sol rides a chariot pursued by the wolf skull. And in Bronze Age Scandinavia, the Trundholm sun chariot. 4 cultures on 3 continents with the same image, and not metaphorically similar, but structurally identical in the logic of it. Some of that is explained by common Indo-European inheritance, the same ancestral migration, the same theological seed, growing into different forms while keeping the same core. That accounts for the India and Greece parallels cleanly, but it doesn't account for everything. Christiansen has spent decades arguing that the Nordic Bronze Age was embedded in a pan-European and trans-Mediterranean exchange network, far more active than most people realize. The amber and Mycenaean tombs evidence establishes material contact. What Christiansen argues is that the contact was also intellectual. Itinerant Bronze Age specialists, smiths, traders, and possibly ritual specialists, were moving across Europe carrying a shared religious vocabulary with them. He identifies structural parallels between Nordic and Mycenaean religious iconography. The twin warrior motif, the solar journey by ship, the horse as solar animal, the axe as a sacred symbol. These all appear in the art of 2 cultures that we know were materially connected. And then there's Egypt. And look, I want to be precise here because this is where the conversations either overclaim or shut down entirely. Nobody is arguing that Egyptian priests were running mystery schools in Scandinavian bogs. That's not what the evidence supports. What the evidence does support is this: the solar bark concept. The sun traveling by boat through the visible sky by day and through the underworld by night appears in Egypt, appears in Mesopotamia, in Bronze Age Scandinavia, and in the Vedic tradition of India. The same cosmological model, the same structural metaphor, in 4 separate Bronze Age cultures spread across thousands of miles. We covered the Egyptian version in the Horaha episode. The solar bark is the foundation of early Egyptian dynastic religion. Ra and the Manjet boat by day, and the Mesektet boat through the Duat by night, emerging reborn at sunrise. That is the same model running in the Scandinavian ship imagery. Whether the overlap is Indo-European inheritance, active Bronze Age transmission through trade networks, or something older that preceded both, the evidence hasn't settled that question yet. But explaining it as coincidence, believing that 4 civilizations independently arrived at the same highly specific metaphor by accident, that's a hard case to make. The pattern is solar cycle theology, the solar bark, the horse-drawn chariot, the cosmological journey, and a visible and a hidden phase. It's present across the Bronze Age world, and Scandinavia is not on the edge of that pattern. It's completely inside of it. The Bronze Age eventually ended, but the tradition that it produced didn't end with it. When the Norse mythology we know from the Eddas was written down in 13th century Iceland, it was preserving material far older than the Viking Age. Sol, the sun goddess who drives her chariot across the sky each day, pursued by the wolf skull, is a direct continuation of the theology encoded in the Trundholm sun chariot, roughly 2,600 years earlier. The horse, the chariot, the daily journey, the cosmic threat that one day it won't complete, all of the specific mythological characters changed over those centuries, but the underlying cosmological model stayed completely intact. When Christianity arrived in Scandinavia, beginning in earnest around the 9th century AD and largely complete by the 11th or 12th century, it encountered a population whose religious calendar was still organized around the solar cycle. The church's approach was the same one that it used everywhere: absorb the existing sacred calendar and rename the festivals. The Midwinter Solar Festival became Christmas. December 25th wasn't chosen because it's historically the birth of Jesus. It was chosen because it overlapped with existing winter solstice observances that the church needed to bring inside. The summer solstice fire festivals became the Feast of St. John the Baptist. The wheel cross, one of the oldest solar symbols in the Bronze Age visual repertoire, became the Celtic cross. Some things simply didn't convert. Midsummer in Scandinavia, still observed today, centers on bonfires, dancing around a decorated pole, gathering herbs believed to carry special properties on that day, and communal acknowledgement of the summer solstice. None of it has a Christian origin, and the church tried for centuries to give it one without much success. Yule follows the same arc, a Norse and Germanic midwinter tradition tied to the solstice and the return of the sun, with the Yule log burned to welcome back the light and the evergreen brought inside during the darkest stretch of the year. These practices got absorbed into the Christmas complex and carried forward for 1,000 years, which is a large part of why Christmas looks the way that it does today. In a northern European climate, where the difference between the longest and the shortest day of the year is pretty dramatic, where winter darkness is a physical reality, the sun's return at the solstice is not an abstraction. These communities encoded that reality into their most durable cultural forms, and the encoding is still running today. Alright, so here's what we built today. Bronze Age Scandinavia had a sophisticated, organized solar religion running from roughly 1800 to 500 BC, and the physical evidence for it, the Trundholm sun chariot, the Nebra sky disk, tens of thousands of petroglyphs, their burial practices, and the ritual specialist graves, are all consistent, widespread, and span over 1,000 years. That religion had 3 roots: a Neolithic tradition in Northern Europe already orienting sacred architecture toward the sun before the Bronze Age began, an Indo-European theological inheritance arriving with the steppe migration, and a Bronze Age trade network connecting Scandinavia to the Mycenaean Greeks, Central Europe, and the Near East, moving religious ideas alongside the metal and amber. The same solar bark concept appears in Egypt, Mesopotamia, Vedic India, and Bronze Age Scandinavia. The same horse-drawn chariot carrying the sun appears in India, Greece, and Scandinavia. Whether that's common Indo-European inheritance, active Bronze Age transmission, or something older upstream that fed into multiple traditions, the pattern is real, and at a certain point, the coincidence explanation just runs out of road. And none of it died cleanly. It all ran through the Eddas, through Christianization, and into the calendar that most people in the Western world are still using today, largely without thinking about where any of it came from. If you've been watching this channel for a while, this should feel familiar in a pretty specific way. When we covered ancient Israelite polytheism, the archaeological evidence that early Israelites worshiped multiple gods, we were tracing the same pattern. A tradition more layered and more connected to the wider ancient world than the official version likes to admit. When we did the Samson and Hercules episode, we were asking the same cross-cultural question, just in a different place. And the Horaha episode that we did is really the companion to this episode. That's the Egyptian half of the solar bark theology that we followed here. These aren't separate topics. They keep turning out to be the same investigation, running in different locations. And the train just keeps moving. Well, everybody, that's the Bronze Age solar cult of Scandinavia. Older than the Vikings, connected to Egypt, India, and Greece, and still running inside traditions that most people celebrate without thinking about where they even came from. As usual, all of my sources are in the description and in the pinned comments. Go read them, and I don't ask you to take my word for it. I ask you to look at the evidence and then make up your own mind. If there's an angle I missed, or a source that belongs in the conversation, or something that you want me to dig into, tell me in the comments. If you want to see me improve anything about these videos, the research, the production, anything, let me know. And subscribe and help me grow and help me make these videos better. If you're new here, all of my claims are always sourced, every topic is fair game, and we go wherever the evidence leads. So please subscribe and ride along. Until then, I'm Alex Arnold, and this has been Arnie's Brain Train. I'll see you on the next one.